Hey people, and welcome to my channel. I'm Mary, and today is Woo Woo Shit Wednesday, where every other Wednesday during spooky season, I share some of my paranormal and woo woo shit experiences with you. So, this week's story takes place in the house that I grew up in. My parents bought this house brand new when I was around 2 years old. So I've talked about it before, but there was a lot of crazy paranormal stuff that happened in this house. But it didn't really start happening until we had been there for quite some time. I mean, at least 10 years we had been living in this house. So the spirit or the entity that I'm going to talk about today is one that we had the most experiences with in our house. Now, obviously, we did have some experiences before this with like my grandma who passed or people that I knew. This entity was a lot darker and it was a lot scarier, and it affected my whole family on a very deep level. And it just kind of like a trickster energy, I guess I would call it. The house that I grew up in, the door that we used was off of the kitchen. So there was a front door that we never used, a back door that went out onto our back porch, and then we had the side door, which was the door that our driveway came up to. When you came in that door, you were in the kitchen, and then if you went straight, you got to, we called it the great room, but it was basically a dining room, office, and living room. It was like a big room, so we had all of those things in there. And then if you went straight back from there, there was a little hallway. To the right was my bedroom, to the left was the bathroom, and then straight back was my sister's room. And then across the house, off of the living room with the wall that backs up to the kitchen, was my parents' bedroom. So, my sister and I, we were the ones who started having experiences with this energy first. And it started off as small things where, like, we would see like a dark shadow out of the corner of our eye, or it would just feel heavy back in that back area where our bedrooms were. You would hear something like whisper your name, things like that, or you would feel something tap you. It got scary. And then eventually my sister had like a one of those creepy jewelry boxes that has like the music box in it where you open it and the little ballerina pops up and it starts playing the music. So that would start randomly going off. And my sister and I, we keep complaining about this, and my dad is just like, whatever, like, you guys are just, your imaginations are going crazy, just calm down. So my sister and I started not wanting to sleep alone in our rooms. So typically my sister would come sneak into my room because I had the bigger bed, and we would sleep in there. And then it kept happening. So we eventually ended up starting to sleep out on the couch, which really pissed my dad off. He wanted us in our bedrooms. He didn't want us in the living room at all, but we were too scared to sleep back there by ourselves. And eventually it started escalating to the point where my mom started having experiences while we were at school. So she would hear something whisper her name, or it would mimic my sister or I saying something, or the music box would go off in the middle of the day. So my mom starts complaining to my dad, and my dad's still kind of like, whatever, whatever, whatever. Until eventually, my dad, when he's home alone, starts having experiences where he would hear one of us in the bedroom when we weren't home, or he would go, like, he would hear a sound and go check it out, and then it would hear something whisper his name in his ear. So there were multiple times that my dad started having these experiences. So he started taking things more seriously at this point. And I believe at one point he had a priest come and bless the house because my parents are Catholic. So the priest came in with holy water and started blessing the house. And this worked for a little while to get the entity to kind of calm down and go away. But it didn't work for very long. I'd say we had a few months of like peace and quiet, and then it started happening again. And it just kind of got to the point where like this became a normal thing that we were dealing with. And at some point, I remember my aunt moved into our house, and she is a construction worker, so she would be working weird hours and stuff like that. She was going through a tough time in her life, and so she was sleeping on our couch. And I think I was in early high school. My sister was about to go into middle school, or like in 6th grade. She was pretty young. But one Saturday night, my aunt gets home later than she usually does from work. So she just kind of comes in the house. I want to say it was like close to or after midnight, so everybody's already in bed. So she was sleeping on the couch, so she lays down on the couch to go to sleep. A few hours later, she's woken up to my sister, a small blonde child that looks like my sister, tapping her, waking her up, asking her to play with her. And my aunt is like, "You've got to go back to bed. Like, if your dad sees you awake right now, he's going to get mad." Because my dad was in the era of like, you can't sleep on the couch. And so she takes my sister by the hand and brings her back to her bedroom and tucks her into bed and tells her goodnight. My aunt goes back to sleep and doesn't think anything of it. So the next morning, we all wake up, and this is a Sunday morning, so we're getting ready for church. My aunt starts asking, where's your sister? Like, she had a late night last night. And everybody's just kind of looking like, what are you talking about? She's like, yeah, she came and woke me up to play with her, and I had to put her back to bed. And we all just kind of stop, and we're sitting there, and we're like, we're getting ready to go pick her up from her best friend's house because she spent the night there last night. My aunt's like, no way. That I swear she came and woke me up. Nope, there's no way she's not here. And we're like, yeah, she's not in the house. She's at her best friend's house. So my aunt freaks out. I don't think we freaked out as much just because we were so used to it at this point, but my aunt was freaking out. And that's kind of the last memory I had with the energy until a few years later. And I know my sister had a couple experiences after I had graduated and gone to college where, like, she was home alone, her and her boyfriend, and they heard my dad come in. And like, my dad every day when he would get home from work would come and say, "Hello, I'm home." And they thought they both heard him come in and say that. And then her boyfriend went out to go greet him, and he was not home. He wasn't there. A few years, I want to say it was my sophomore year of college. My now ex-husband and I came home to visit my family, and after I had graduated from high school, my sister decided to move into my old room. It was a bigger room, and it honestly just felt lighter than my sister's room did. There was a lot of that dark energy in her room. And while we were home, we were supposed to be sleeping in my sister's old room on this little twin-size bed. And so we are spending time with my family. We decide that we're going to go to bed, and we go and we get in the bed. And like I said, this is a small bed, and we were not very small people. So we're like kind of cuddling and like just kind of stuck where we are. And I felt that energy, and I looked up at the doorway, and I saw this dark cloaked figure. And I start like tapping my ex, and I'm like, "Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, do you see that?" And he's like, yes, I do. And it starts coming at us. So he pulls the covers over our heads like we're children. But like, what else were we going to do in this moment? That thing is coming from the only exit. And it just rushes at us. We pull the covers over our heads. We're like screaming. And we stay under the covers for a lot longer than I'd like to admit, as at that point a young adult. But we did. We stayed under the covers, and we finally decided to like peek our heads out and come out. And nothing else happened with that energy that night, but I don't think either of us got any more sleep after that. And yeah, it scared us shitless. It was terrifying. After that, my parents ended up selling the land and the house, and they moved into the house that they live in now. And this was in 2017. So I had graduated from college at this point. I don't think there were any more there wasn't really any more activity with this entity at all um, at this point. And time goes on and it gets to be 2021, and that is when I separated from my ex-husband and ended up moving back home to my parents' house. And there was a period of time where my sister and her fiance had moved in, and then they bought a house and moved out. So once they moved out, I was trying to figure out how to make it possible for my at least one of my dogs to come live with me. My ex and I had three dogs, and I was trying to see if Puccini, who was one of my pugs, I was trying to see if he could come live with me. So I had him, I want to say he was there for like maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks, and he's still getting used to being in the new environment. So he was a little bit more barky and vocal than he usually would be, especially in the mornings when he heard other people walking around and he wasn't used to that. So I would, he would start barking and I would say, Puccini, hush, Puccini, hush. And so I went to work this morning, and my mom is home alone with Puccini, my dog, and my parents' dog, Lucy. And Puccini is downstairs and he starts barking at something. And my mom hears from my bedroom upstairs, Puccini, hush. So my mom is like, did Mary not go to work? So she calls me and she's like, hey, are you at work? And I said, yeah. Why? And so she explains to me what happened. And I just remember the like drop in my stomach of like, oh no, here we go again. So at that point, I decided that I was going to sage and cleanse the house and just see what happened. And so far, so good. Fingers crossed, nothing's happened again. But that was the dark entity that haunted my family for years. And it started in a time when I was dealing with a lot of dark negative emotions. And I think it's important to talk about this because when we are in times like that, it tends to attract darker energies, and those things tend to attach to us, especially when we start identifying with those dark emotions. So when we're feeling a lot of guilt, a lot of shame, a lot of self-hatred, those types of feelings call in dark energies that are going to kind of perpetuate those feelings. They kind of feed off of it. And I think there was a lot of that going on in each person in my family at that point in time. But for me specifically during that time, I remember feeling just a lot of deep self-hatred. And I can't speak for everybody else in my family and what they were feeling, but I do feel like there was like a collective darkness that just gave this energy like a home to feed off of. And I think through emotional work and us, the family that I have now, the connections that we all have with each other, it's very different than it was when we were living in that house and during those times that all those things were happening. There's a lot more communication, there's a lot more understanding and emotional depth. And I don't know, I think that speaks to why that entity isn't around anymore. And I think that's important to touch on because when we get in dark places like that, having something that attaches to us can make that so much worse. So I just kind of want to bring up that it's important that when you are feeling dark feelings, when you're feeling like the scum of the earth, it's important to remind yourself that you are not those feelings. You're not worthless or the worst person in the world. These are just feelings that pass. And if you identify as someone who loathes yourself, it's going to pull in dark energy, especially if you are more open to those sorts of things. So that's something to be aware of if you are somebody who has gifts like I do, just because you're more vulnerable to things like that, and learning how to recognize okay, those feelings, while they come up sometimes, they don't define who I am. And it took me a very long time to figure that out. And like going through my divorce and stuff like that was a really big part of that. And I think that's a lot of the reason why I haven't had any more interactions with that energy. And I don't know if anybody else in my family has, but they haven't said anything if they have. So that is the story of the dark entity that haunted my family for years. And luckily, at this point, we have not had any issues with it, at least not that I'm aware of. And yeah, if you're into woo woo or paranormal shit, like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.